Morning, everyone. Definitely happy, pleased to be here. This is an exciting time. I think everyone can agree with the crowds at Metal Investor Forum, as well as the events starting today, that we're really taking off in this sector. So in ahead of the curve is the name of this presentation. And as the name states, is we're trying to get in ahead of curve of this mining sector boom that has just started and has started to take off. My website is Supercharge Stocks, and it's been around for a couple of years. Most of what I try to do is free, so about 90 to 95% of all content is free on the site. And I'm building everything from how I look at stocks, as well as just the information that I have. It's a lot of data, a lot of information. And then there's a subscription where at the end of the day, you're getting to see what do I own. So that's Supercharge Stocks. And the thesis here today is that a number of things, but one is it's the Roaring 20s again, and the Great Depression all wrapped into one in one very short time frame. So there's a lot of good and there's also a lot of bad. So the mission here is getting people in ahead of this curve, and it's mainly about shifting allocation of assets away from riskier type of plays to, oddly enough, the mining sector being actually a lot safer. So that's my thesis, which for the last 7 years would have seemed utterly insane, but I'm setting it up here with a number of different factors to look at. So I'm trying to take this at a different angle as well. It's more of a macro general outlook as to how I see the world. So right now, the main thesis is that we essentially live in a clown world. Everything is basically upside down. When I grew up in the 80s, we were told about the Soviet Union and how evil they were and all this big brother watching. We now exactly live in that world here in the West. So literally everything that I was taught was bad is now being praised and honored as being saintly in the West today, and it's very confusing for someone my age to look at and think, what is happening here? Never in the history of modern history have we seen this level of conflict arising, and we're going to get to that soon too, because it's not talked a lot about in the mainstream media either as well. So another thing is exposing a lot of the myths. We hear a lot of different myths out there about life's getting better, this, that, everything else, and once again, it's who's it getting better for? And my theory is, it's not a theory, all the data suggests it's not the West at all. So are we a globalist model, or are we people living in a community? We're getting mixed messages from different politics, and never before has politics mattered so much. Usually I would say politics is one small factor if you're looking at data or you're looking at the markets. But my theory right now is that it is the most important thing, because we're sitting at a precipice right now. So, true cold, no fears, no fire. This is one of my favorite, sorry, it's over here. One of my favorite sayings, because not only is it relevant towards mining itself to see if there's fake gold, and we're looking for true data, but there's never been a time than now where you're not allowed to question things. There is no voice, whether is under hate speech laws or anything else, is that if you question certain things, not only will you be censored, you'll be admonished. You're just supposed to take things at face value, whether it comes from an entertainer or something else, is that if we live in a society where it can't resist, where your beliefs can't be challenged, and you can't be questioned about it, and you can't defend it, then we're into a totalitarian state. It doesn't matter which side, left or right, equally bad. If it's authoritarian, it's totalitarian, it's not good. So that's the main theme for mining, is that we can test to see if something's real or not. There's science, there's data. When you're dealing with markets, the markets are people. And also now, unfortunately, to a large extent, AI, computers, which is still people. They're still putting the data in there. So if you're setting the parameters to things, you get to choose the outcomes. Moving along, just an overview of what we're going to talk about. At the end of the day, myself, everyone else, and almost all of the news is in the business of prediction. And so there's a lot of noise out there. And we went through the thesis, but I want to talk about the state of the West as well, because that is vitally important. I'll leave any kind of opinions alone. I'm just going to make general statements. Not only do I not want to get in trouble, but it's just something, one of the main themes here is critical thinking. I want people to go back, think it through, and do research themselves. When I look at data, I look at source data. I question as to who's telling me, why are they telling me, what's the motivation behind it. And that went right from academia, where that was pretty obvious, as well as in the markets, whether it's a brokerage firm, it's fairly obvious once you start practicing it. I really like Ray Dalio. I've got a big soft spot for him because he's a Stoic philosopher. I love his principles. I love his videos. I love the work that he's doing as a generalist to get ideas into the market. But I love that quote as well. So you don't hear a lot of that out there today. But I wanted to include someone that's outside of these rooms because we get to hear in the bubble of how important and how things are happening. But a billionaire hedge fund manager like Ray Dalio, to hear him talk about gold, that adds a little bit more punch to our scenario. Stan Druckenmiller is another family office billionaire hedge fund. He's really positive on copper. I wanted to throw him in as well because this is a huge name from the 80s and 90s who's still around with a huge family office that's really bullish on copper. This is one of my favorite people out there. If you haven't read him, please do. You've probably used his terms, whether it's skin in the game, black swan, but he doesn't mind stirring it up a bit. And he is a big fan of the idea of having skin in the game. If you don't have skin in the game, whether it's with a fund or with anything else, is if there's nothing at stake, then why should I trust you or believe you? And that's critical in what I'm doing, is that I don't need to be right or wrong. If I'm putting my money towards something and I'm following advice of people that are doing well, and I've got some data to back it up, then taking a shot or taking a swing at something, I have no vested interest other than, hopefully I've done my homework. If something comes out of left field, it comes out of left field. If you don't hit the vein, you don't hit the vein. I mean, there's no hard feelings. But one of the key factors that he talks about is this idea of the interconnection or interconnectability of the world having being actually quite a negative thing. That what we've done is we haven't created a robust system at all. This interconnectivity has actually created quite a fragile system that one chain along any kind of those connections can cause catastrophic events down the road. So this notion of this interconnected global world that is going to solve all of the world's problems is myth number one. It's this notion of why can't we all get along, or the 60s, this kind of let's just all love each other. And one of my worst terms I'm going to relate is we're all part of the human race, which is not a thing. That doesn't exist. There is no human race. We're a species. So whenever these cliche terms come out, they drive me nuts because it has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with propaganda. So the difference between academic work and reality, he really points it out, because there's a big, huge, vast difference between theoretical work and what you'd like to see, or utopian ideology, compared to what the actual world is like. And what we're interested in is what the actual world is like. So at the end of the day, and I always like to take a step back and look at things in a bit of a humorous way, is this business of prediction. This is not unlike the Oracle of Delphi, where you're kind of either drug-induced shamanic rituals of hearing voices from the gods telling you about this, that, or anything else. There are studies and there are data, whether it is literally ones from hem lengths on women to the stock market, to you name it. How many dogs bark in a night, that there might be a correlation. So the problem with that is that there's so much data that you can make correlations between things that have nothing in common whatsoever. And unfortunately, we are not unlike the computers we create. We love patterns and we love to find patterns. So I always like to joke around that at the end of the day, we're here trying to predict the future. And anyone who says, I'm able to predict the future, is literally out of their mind. What we're really trying to say is there's a statistic probability out of the information that I have that an event will occur. That's a long-winded way of saying I can tell the future. Now, what happens though is if you have revisionist data, and you have revisionist history, and you have revisionist ideology going back, then your data is utterly meaningless. And I'm not going to pick on economics too much, but I studied economics at university. That data is constantly being revised, even in the best of markets at the best of times. So if my model starts out being incorrect 6 months in with revised data 6 months later, it was never right to begin with. And once again, that goes for any model. The easiest one in the room to pick on is any climate change model, which has never been right in 50 years. But the problem with that is that you're dealing with a complex system, and people forget that. And the market is no different. It is a complex system. The variable you put on one factor over another has a massive variance when you're dealing, especially with points in degrees of temperature. And once again, we can all admit that there's climate change. That's not a hard thing to say. That's kind of like saying there's evolution or change. Yes, things evolve, things change. The problem becomes they use those catchwords as an idea to convey that if you don't believe in change, that you're somehow wrong. The problem is that that's loaded with a whole bunch of other ideology, which people argue that, no, I don't agree with this part you're saying. And this isn't about climate change, but it is about this prediction of the future of it's exceptionally difficult. What's your modeling? And if you want to know the truth about something, is those questions. Where's your data? What's the model? Is it working? And when it comes down to not very well, then the rest is just noise. This is noise. Now, it seems like I'm picking mostly on the left, but yeah, the Fox is on there as well. This is all noise. I'm amazed by really smart people here in Canada that'll tell me about how CBC is so amazing and so great. And I'll say, this is state-funded media. It always has been. This is no different than whenever I'm in school and they tell about how evil Russia had state-funded media. This is state-funded media. If you don't think that that's biased, then you're part of the problem. You've bought into the propaganda too much. Now, unfortunately, the amount of work it takes to get through all of that noise, it's almost irrelevant because there is no data there. That's not data. That's not even news. Most of this today is opinion pieces. That is not news. Now, unfortunately, and the reason why this matters is that bleeds into all of your talk show ones on MSNBC as well. A lot of that data has either been changed to mean something else, whether it's unemployment and employment, are you working, are you not working? All of these things change whether the public knows it or not. This basket of goods is changed to this basket of goods. And it doesn't mean that it's not useful, it just means that people listen to something, they hear it, and they go, oh, we have the best unemployment numbers ever. Well, no, it's almost meaningless because since 1990, 60-something% of the jobs are low pay, low wage, low hour. Yet we still keep on hearing about we need technicians in the West. No, we don't. We don't need more STEM people. We have plenty. The problem is we need more people to work Tim Hortons and Starbucks. So even when they talk about we desperately need, and this isn't to say there shouldn't be immigration, of course there should, is that the left is saying we want more immigration for poor labor. And that doesn't work. That doesn't make anyone happy. It isn't this ideal dream of I'm going to work my way up. That almost doesn't exist anymore as well. We've moved into this weird culture where you're not working your way up from the ground floor to the top anymore. So we can thank these two for propaganda. They're the ones who developed and really encouraged it. And Saul Alinsky is one of the favorites of the left. Other than that quote, his favorite quote is that you always blame the other side for the things that you're doing or about to do. We see this rampant today. So the reason why I put this in as well is that if you're fracturing society, whether on purpose or for a higher ideal or your belief system, well then how do you think that's going to affect your market? Even if your market is just mostly in managed money, that's still going to have an effect. How's the rest of the world going to look at your market? And I would say poorly. So, the state or suicide of the West. Never, when you ask other cultures about the West, they're amazed that they think, how did you manage to decide to destroy yourself? It's absolutely shocking. Not a bullet has been fired, but you're willing to give up everything you've built, hand it over to someone else, and just choose to say, you know what, let someone else take control now for a while. When has that ever existed in time, other than fall of empires, which also looks oddly kind of like what we're facing? Now, I don't want to get too much into this because really at the end of the day, demographics is the number one thing that one's going to have to look at for the future. And I hold no opinion either way, but that demographic change, that will affect everything, including economics, your markets, everything else. So if you're not aware of it, time to get aware of it because that's going to be the key driver. So that sounds terrible and doom and gloom and a pretty bad black pill. That's not a lot of fun. And let's be honest, most people aren't too optimistic about the future long term either, whether it's markets or anything else. But I say that there's a huge silver lining, and at the same time, it can't be possible. You can't have a raging bull market with an absolute depression. Well, of course you can. And in the clown world where we live, where we have financial models that can't work, A, because of revised data, or 2, because of negative interest rates that don't work in financial models, then anything's possible. And when you have the Fed even coming out saying we don't understand how the markets are working, that's even more concerning. So all of that leads me to the necessary idea that I want to own things that make things. I don't want to own Apple. I have no interest in it. Not to pick on Apple, although I don't really like them anyway, but I don't need a cell phone every 2 years. I want to own all the stuff that makes Apple products. So I want to own the cobalt. I'd rather get paid in copper and gold than in any fiat currency, because that's almost utterly useless and worth nothing. Because at heart of hearts, I'm interested in what has actual value. And when you're living in an age of complete uncertainty and possible chaos, whether it's society, culturally, politically, then I want to go exactly to the stuff that makes stuff. And even in times of absolute desperation, someone is expanding. And I don't care what anyone says, China is expanding. Whether it's untouched or not being recognized, it is. These are the rest of the tools that one uses when looking, and they're all useful. Now, like, I may sound like I'm beating up on economics. Not at all. You need to have it. Statistics is probably the most important. Fundamental analysis now, I would say, is one of the most important, with Graham and Dodd, back to Warren Buffett style type of idea investing, is there value? That chart in the background, that's the Canadian venture market. Some people would look at that and go, oh my God, that's a total nightmare. I look at that and I go, holy cow, there's so much money to be made here. Will mining ever come back? Is there actually an economic cycle? Of course there is. In a couple of years, we're going to be looking back going, oh, that's obvious, I would have bought down there. So it started. And a market, at the end of the day, a market is you and me. The market isn't some weird, vast computer in New York. It's people. That's a marketplace. So it's just a matter of getting people to know, why do I care about copper? Why do I care about gold? It's a pretty easy conversation when they look around them and go, things are pretty nerve-wracking right now. I want stability, and I want the stuff that builds stuff. So just a couple quick companies that I've worked with, and done well with. Great Bear is an obvious one. I came in a bit late at $1.89. I didn't sell up at 9. I held on to it. Still told people that it was great. Did at 6 as well. Talked to Chris whenever it was down around 6, 7. Said, hey, what's going on with Rob Ross with the company? They're forging ahead dramatically. This is going to have a big year as well. Keep an eye on it. And I think everyone knows the story. It's not a hard one to follow. Along that same breadth is Amex Exploration. They're here. I was presenting in London. They won the pitch challenge, so they impressed a lot of people there. This is a company I've liked since August, and we're working together as well. This one I think is going to be having an outstanding year. They've got their 3rd drill rig on property, on site, and they're doing 100,000 meters of drilling. So they're going to be hitting milestones and news a lot. One to keep on the side of your screen. High Gold is another favorite of mine up in Alaska. I know people always want to hear some stocks, so this one's also throw it up beside your computer. The Johnson Track, this is excellent company to take a peek at. And this one here, if you want to see a big story developing, is Juggernaut Exploration. This one here is pretty exciting because they did a consolidation of share. It's a tight structure. They've got 3 properties, 2 of which came from Robert Dickinson himself. That they got a pretty sweet deal. If you go talk to Dan Stewart, who's going to be around, come on and talk to me about it. But this one here, there'll be a big trading opportunity, and there'll be lots of news, and those properties are pretty excited, especially from a geological standpoint. So I just want to thank you for coming and listening to this. I wanted to focus on more of a broad spectrum of how I look at things and why I'm making the case for mining. And I've been a broker at Merrill Lynch. I come from a pretty strong financial background, and to me, this is the time. There's never been a clear indication that looking for the things that make things, that help build infrastructure, that help build all technology. And if you believe that carbon is the problem that's killing the earth, almost every solution, other than dramatic overpopulation in third world, the most important things that come from mining create all of the clean and green technology, whether it's Tesla batteries, electric cars, solar panels, all of that. That all comes from mining. And I just want to let you know that although this started off a little bit dreary and depressing, it doesn't mean that you have to follow that market down with it as well. And there will be big changes, and there are things to come. I don't think the mainstream news even wants to admit how divided the West is right now. They like to use terms like populism, which is another word for democracy, the people. The people are not happy, and those are the people that built these countries, and that are hardworking people that look and go, why am I giving this away? And why do every time I look on the news, everyone that I talk to seems to agree with me, but on the news, they're saying a different story. So, for me, the big message is critical thinking. Why is the person telling me this? My motivation is I'm an advocate for mining, so I'm very sincere as to what my motivation is. But I always want people to go look, research for themselves, find the data, find out why they told them, who told them that idea or information, and what's the source, where did it come from? And if it didn't come from somewhere, then maybe you just told yourself. Thanks so much.